at least we're at the top of the hour. So we'll go ahead and start off. Want to certainly thank everybody that's here, taking your time to attend. Very much appreciated. And do want to let everybody know that we are recording. So if that's an issue at all, we'll be saving the recording and sharing it on the ISACA San Diego chapter website. And we'll make a copy of the slide deck available there for everybody as well. And we'll shoot an email to everybody on with a link to it. It'll probably take a couple of days for us to edit it down, remove the dad jokes and whatnot, and then be able to put it up. But we'll have that for you. So if anybody wants to watch it afterwards, or if anybody does have an issue with being part of a recording, we would just ask to circle back and check out the recording when that is available. Do want to send out a special note of thanks, not only to everybody that's here and attending, but to Joe, my partner and co-host here in this webinar. This was originally his idea. He reached out with it. I thought it was a great idea, and it's been an absolute pleasure collaborating with you to help put everything together. We do want to say thank you to the organizations that kind of help make this possible. ISACA San Diego chapter endorsed this. This is actually going to be the first webinar that we're doing in a series of community-based webinars that are designed to not only try to have value for the members of ISACA, but for members of communities as well. So even for folks that aren't in so much in the information security industry or the insurance industry, but just helping people, families, and communities to help themselves. So we'll have others coming forward, but do want to say thank you to them. Want to say thank you to FR Secure, which is where I work, for supporting and endorsing the opportunity to do this and letting me slide out for part of the day to host it. We also were helped in the promotion from the Cybersecurity of Excellence in San Diego. So thank you to everyone there, especially the president, Lisa Easterly. Joe, if you want to take a moment and say thanks to the other icons and participants we got, that'd be fantastic.
Of course. My agency's C3 Insurance, of course, here in San Diego. And Trucking Proud, the trucking brand of C3 Insurance, that is a strategic partner to the California Trucking Association. And of course, the California Trucking Association, it's a nonprofit org that represents the trucking industry here in California, in Sacramento, and all around the state. They do a lot to help promote trucking, and part of this presentation is to talk about some of the cybersecurity risks that also affect trucking as well. So thank you for attending.
Awesome. And for everybody that is here, we do want to make this be as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions, comments, perspectives, or thoughts, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll work to answer them in real time as best as possible. And we save some time at the end for any other questions that kind of linger or may not be directly related to what we're covering, but something that we want to give attention to. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. We promise not to spend a lot of time on the first couple of slides here. I do see we have a raised hand from Leo. Let's see what we got in. Okay, and then somebody, yes, sorry. Somebody, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, asked if we can get a copy of the slide deck? And the answer is yes. We're recording the video and the slide deck, and we'll be making it available on the ISACA San Diego chapter website. So if you are attending, and if you are logged in as anonymous or anything like that, please drop a link just straight to the presenters, and we'll make sure you're on the list there as well. But no, all good, and appreciate you asking, and all good on that front. So Joe, if you want to take a minute and let the people know who you are, I'll follow in suit right after.
Okay. I am Joe. I work in insurance, and specifically I work in the cybersecurity, cyber insurance space, and also in the trucking space. And I've worked in a number of different industries in my 15-year career as an insurance broker, commercial insurance broker. And yeah, what else can I say? I got two young kids, 5 and 8. I read a lot of sci-fi. I like Star Trek versus Star Wars, although The Mandalorian's pretty good. And I just want to help educate people about these complicated risks and these complicated coverages. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah. And so everybody knows Joe and I have probably been friends for about 10 years now. And there's times where what each of us do professionally helps to bring us together. But great guy. If you ever have questions on this stuff, he's very knowledgeable, happy to help, no pressure. And at the end of the day, really is just wanting to do the right thing by everybody. This slide is me. I am Dave Tuckman. By day, I'm an information security consultant at FR Secure. FR Secure is located in Minnesota. I'm out in San Diego with the opportunity to work remote. The biggest things about FR Secure, everything we do is about information security, but our mission is to help fix a broken industry, and with a focus on mission over money. So there's a strong passion when we have the opportunity to try and put together webinars and presentations like this, just to help, like I said, families, individuals, and businesses help themselves, because the stronger our communities are, the stronger each of us are. I do have the opportunity to serve as president of the ISACA San Diego chapter, which has been an awesome experience. And you'll see on here other things that I've done, but we're here to help you. So we're going to move on to the next slide. And ultimately, before we dive in, what we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of is how important it is to have a plan. The slogan or the statement, if you fail to plan, you're really planning to fail. It's definitely applicable in what we're covering here, but it goes way beyond that into things that we can do to help ourselves and help our families and those around us. What we will be talking about here is on a level of how you can help to plan to help make your organization more resilient against the cyber risks that are out there, and just to protect your organization. A lot of what we'll be covering is not just us espousing these things that you need to do, but the list of stuff that we'll go over are actually the fundamental expectations that an insurance company is going to be looking for from an organization, really to be eligible or to be considered for cyber insurance, as that industry just continues to mature. There's 4 sections that we'll be covering within the webinar here. Those are Joe's going to provide us with an industry overview of what's happening in the industry, particularly through the eyes of the insurance companies, not so much of an insurance broker, as they're going to be doing what the insurance companies are ultimately looking for. The second section, we're going to take a quick look at ways to help you and your organization identify risk. And then we do have a cyber insurance checklist. It's called 12+2 because there's kind of a common, or if you were to Google it, you'll see what are considered the 12 essential security controls. But as Joe and I were putting this together, we identified 2 additional ones. So there,
do you have a 0 slide too, like a 0?
we do, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
great.
and it's because the 12 are numbered 1 through 12, and when I thought of one of the extra 2, I wanted it to go first, so there becomes our 0.
Got it. Okay.
So it still ends up adding up to the same, but that's why we have a slide 0, and we'll go through. Didn't want to impact the integrity of the 1 through 12.
Right.
And then at the end, we've got some resources and links to make available to everybody. You don't have to write them down. They'll be available on the slide deck that you can download in its completeness. So we want you to be able to enjoy what we're covering and not feel like you got to take a whole bunch of notes. So if we dive in, these are the 4 sections looking at industry overview that Joe will be walking us through. We're going to look at trends and challenges, underwriting policies, the impact of escalating cyber attacks, and strategic adaptation for comprehensive coverage. So Joe, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you here and let you start covering these, and just let me know when you want me to advance the slide.
Great. Thanks for the great introduction, Dave. I'm really excited to share this information with you guys. I appreciate everyone for coming. I know you're all having a busy day today and taking 45 minutes with us. We appreciate you taking the time to learn about cyber insurance and cybersecurity as it affects us all. So I wanted to start this with kind of a timeline of what's going on in the cyber insurance market as far as premiums and risk goes. Back at the back end of COVID in 2021 Q4 and Q1 of 2022, we really saw an immense increase in pricing. A lot of people were caught off guard and getting increases of 30 to 150% in their insurance premiums. It was a very hard conversation to have with companies to tell them that their insurance is increasing so much. And that was a lot due to the increasing in cyber crimes and cyber data breaches. I think you guys probably saw back then we were getting 2 or 3 large breaches a week, whether it was like a large credit agency or a bank or Home Depot or Target. These all are driving the factors in these cyber breaches. Fortunately, the good news is looking at 2023 Q1 and going forward is that the premiums have flattened and in some cases decreased due to a lot of factors, but mostly because companies have gotten more serious about cybersecurity. That's either because they've seen other people be breached or their insurance companies are requiring them to have certain controls in place in order to even get the insurance. So that's the good news. Some other things here is we're seeing smaller deductibles or insurance loss funds. We're seeing less co-insurance, so the companies are making the insurance, the insurance carriers are making the companies with the cyber insurance pay less of the loss, or less share of the loss. And some statistics to show you how much people are using cyber insurance or buying cyber insurance is 48% of people have already bought cyber insurance, and another 32% are looking to buy it. That leaves about 20% who neither have it or are looking to buy it. But I see that those self-insured people are probably gonna decide to get it eventually.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any of that taper off because there's been an increase in what cyber insurance will not cover?
Yeah, the cyber insurance companies are getting a little bit more specific on what they're covering and what they're not covering. I'll get into that a little bit later, but basically the insurance carriers have non-standard forms. There's no standard form like there is for general liability. And the more times that they end up paying out risks on things that they didn't think they would, just because their wording is too broad, they change the wording for the next policy that comes out, and you end up with less coverage, even though, it looks like the same.
Cool. Yeah, I just even in looking at some of the headlines, some of the litigation or actions where somebody had a policy, but for some reason the insurance company tried to not pay for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we can go over that. I think I have a slide on that a little bit on slide 4. So we'll get into that. That's a good question.
Awesome.
All right, so this slide's about how underwriting is getting more strict. Insurance companies are getting more strict on the underwriting side of it, and they're also getting strict on the policy wording side and also the payment of claims. So because global attacks have surged so much, 38% in 2022 compared to 2021, they've had more losses and higher premiums due to more loss ratios. Like I said in the previous slide, though, because they've been more strict and they've increased premiums, their loss ratios have gone down and stabilized the overall cyber insurance industry. But still, we're kind of seeing that it's getting harder and harder to qualify for insurance, and we're having to, of course, hire companies and consultants for the companies that are less sophisticated or more sophisticated, like of course FR Secure, in order to get those companies up to speed so they can even qualify for the cyber insurance. So there's an elevated cost for the company besides just buying the insurance. They need to invest more in their cybersecurity in general. Next slide.
Sure. And I'm going to drop into the chat my LinkedIn URL and Joe's as well. So if there's anybody online that wants to connect with us and have any questions afterwards or offline, feel free. So I'll do that. But Mr. Joe, there it is.
I promise I'll accept your connection.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel vulnerable saying that, so you help. I appreciate that.
All right, so I just want to throw out some pretty significant statistics here. 83% of organizations encountered multiple data breaches. So we're seeing a lot of data breaches out there in the market still. And the average cost, this is average in the US, is 9.44 million, and globally 4.25 million. And you're seeing, I mean, the US is targeted by far much more than anybody else. I mean, I think some of you guys that have seen like the threat vector What is that website where it shows like the people hacking each other? I don't know, maybe we can add that later in the resources. But
Oh, the ones that look like war games.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll try and find something towards the end. Yeah.
So the US is just targeted, much more than any other country. That's why you're seeing higher averages. Stolen credentials and phishing remain the top attack vectors. So this is still like the human element. You can make a lot of controls like Dave's going to talk about, but if you have bad password or email hygiene, you're going to still have these breaches no matter what controls you put in place. So it's definitely something that we concentrate on, is educating employees. So the insurer response and adjustments, that's just basically saying that, like we were saying before, insurance companies are getting more stringent. They're adding more exclusions to policies. More things are being added by endorsement, where you have to buy it up instead of it coming with the policy. And then I think people know this, but your insurance application becomes part of your policy. So if you represent something on your insurance application and it doesn't end up being true, and there's a breach that comes up from that, it is grounds for a rescission, or the company saying that, we insured you based on this information, and because of that, we're not going to cover you. Everybody, as long as they're operating in good faith and they thought, something, and they weren't lying or anything, usually there's not a problem. But if you said you had multi-factor authentication and you didn't, then you might have an issue. And next slide.
Sure. And then we do have a question. I'll have you go over this slide, and then I'll throw the question that came in your way as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this graphic basically talks about how cybersecurity and cyber insurance kind of work together. Now there's a lot more overlap. Some cyber insurance companies are adding services for identifying, protecting, and detecting. And then, of course, IR teams, incident response teams, are hired outside insurance as well. And they can be part of the response. However, the insurance companies are still the only ones that are going to help you recover lost business or lost or pay out on your behalf, minus the deductible. So that's kind of why I put this graphic in there. So the underwriter expectations, like we were saying, are getting more stringent. They're focusing on, you can't even qualify for an insurance policy anymore unless you have multi-factor authentication. I think there's one company that will still insure you, but it's basically a norm in the industry or businesses in general that you have that. They're looking for increased controls for authentication, access controls, GDPR compliance, is going to make you look good in the eyes of the insurance company. And as far as aligning strategy with risk management, the insurance companies just want to see that you have good cyber hygiene, that you are focusing on a culture of cyber safety. If we were going to take that from, like construction, where you have a safety culture, or trucking, where you have your drivers are safe, everybody is doing trainings and looking at ways in order to reduce close calls and reduce claims and everything like that. We're looking at that on the cyber side too. So the more controls, the more planning, like we were talking about before, that you guys do, is gonna equal less premiums for you and more advantageous cyber policies with less exclusions. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that part. But what was the question, Dave?
Cool. JR asked, how does insurance overviews the end results of Tropical Storm Hillary? And I don't know if that necessarily would correlate to cyber insurance as much as more general insurance. But would it be covered if like there was physical damage, say to servers or something like that?
Yeah, so Tropical Storm Hillary came through last weekend. It wasn't as big as we thought it was going to be. I know a lot of people in my neighborhood were hunkering down. We canceled all our plans and ended up being just like a really heavy rainstorm. But still there's damage due to rain and wind. And if servers are damaged directly, usually that's covered under a property policy. And property policy would have a business income limit as well, in case those servers went down and you weren't able to conduct business. But yeah, that would usually be covered under a general liability policy because it would be physical damage, and physical damage or bodily injury are covered under the general liability policy. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, and actually for where Joe and I are, we got off relatively easy with the storm. I was reading that over in Palm Springs, there was some serious flooding, and actually like 911 services were interrupted. So we got off lucky, but it
Yeah,
did.
I think what happens in places like San Diego and Palm Springs is we just don't have the infrastructure for large storms or rains. I mean, in Florida or Texas, they're mostly ready for that kind of thing, where if we have a large tropical storm here, we don't even have the drainage in order to, get the water off the street. So yeah, it was a smaller storm than we expected, which was great, but we are less prepared as a city in general. I think people saw that.
Yeah, and for anybody attending that's not a local out here, we specialize in earthquakes and fires. That's our specialty.
Right.
So we've got thanks, Joe. That was great. So this section is just one slide that we actually may end up doing a subsequent webinar off of, but we did want to include it in here just to help anybody understand where to look for risks. They may overlap into cyber risks, but if you're a business, we want to be this was something that had been put together. We used to use this a lot where I worked at previously, where we could just take an organization, sit down with them, and help explain where risk to the organization may take place, and wanted to share it with everybody here. So first one really is company. What is your company doing? Are you at the forefront of technology, or are you working on something, developing a product or service that may be on its way out? There's the old saying that people didn't stop making buggy whips, they just stopped buying them. And you kind of want to, so as an organization, you want to do a little bit of a self-reflection there, because even for what you're doing, then you can look at how you're using technology to best support, whether it's making things more efficiently, having better communication with clients, supporting clients, things along those lines. The next bucket is customers, and this is taking the time to look at, let's say in our business, if we did experience a breach, how does that impact our customers? How does that impact our reputation to customers? And how does it impact the potential of customer loyalty? how hard for whatever we're doing, would it be easy for them to say, hey, that's great, but we're just going to go over here now because of this. And especially if we've got customers where it's transactional, where there isn't a long-term tie-in, it becomes more transactional to where they can potentially take their business somewhere else. Competition is not only looking at what your company's doing and reflecting on that and ways that you may be able to improve, but looking at what your competition's doing. What are they doing that may siphon off new clients, existing clients, as well as are they leveraging some new technologies? If we don't look at these things, there are potential risks to an organization that we haven't properly given due diligence towards. And the last bucket is environment. And environment isn't really like trees and rivers and stuff like that, as much as looking at the economy. Layoffs, what is consumer confidence in the economy. Environment can be external regulations. In some ways, the expectations that insurance companies are putting on organizations, that's an environmental concern that we want to at least be aware of, take into consideration. And I know supply chains are written in there as well, and that's actually one of the 12 items that we'll cover. So if you got any questions on these, feel free to drop them in the chat. Like I said, we didn't want to spend a lot of time on this, as much as we felt it was better to include it, give it some time. And again, maybe we'll, if the cards fall right, we could probably do a separate webinar just on that to hopefully help everybody out. So in this section, we get to dive into what are those 12 plus 2 essential security controls. And this is the one that Joe was referring to as number 0. And the reason it's number 0, and I'll go ahead a slide and then come back, but you will see, and I will drop this link into the chat as well. But for this one, you'll see down here on these slides, I put a link to an article that is on LinkedIn that somebody else has published that lists what are the 12 essential security items that cyber insurance companies are looking for. So we'll go through those, but if I take you back here, and let me just drop that link in the chat real quick. Surprisingly, what was not on that list, and I think maybe it's just an assumptive that exists, is you got to know what your inventory is. You got to know what you have. And when we talk about inventory and we're talking about cybersecurity, think of the hardware that your organization has. I think even CIS says you can't protect what you don't know that you have. So we need to have a good inventory of what is our hardware infrastructure, software. The way it plays out is we're going to have people using devices, whether it's mobile devices, servers, cloud servers, laptops, desktops. That's what everybody's doing their work on. And within that, what software programs are they using? And if we can identify what software programs are proper for an organization to use, then we've got the opportunity to identify if there are some being used that we didn't authorize or aren't part of normal company operations to help us protect ourselves. We want to be aware of the cloud services that the organization's using. So again, we can prevent somebody, whether it's somebody internal that's rogue, potentially just creating a Dropbox account and taking a bunch of internal proprietary information or confidential information, having the ability to put it over in Dropbox. Then when we have the software, the services, the hardware, everything really evolves around the data. That's the most important part. That's where we have the information that we need to be able to run the business. But it's also the information that we may be protecting on behalf of clients. And also included in here, think of IoT devices. If a network's not properly configured, you could easily have an IoT device that may be on the same part of a network. And if that IoT device, normally IT people aren't going to look at that and put it in the same degree of patch management, things like that we do with other stuff. But if it's public facing, it is a point within the attack surface that we want to be aware of. Whenever we're doing risk assessments, we're always looking to see if clients have mapped out how their networks are configured, so we know what devices should be where, as well as being able to identify what isn't there. And if an organization, data flow diagrams are a heavy lift, but if we can do data flow diagrams where we know when the data comes in, where it goes, what it goes through, who should have access to it, and who should not have access, all the way through to where we don't need it anymore and how we're disposing of it, that becomes our game plan on what we're trying to protect. So for some reason, this wasn't in the 12, but we felt it very important, and that's why we wanted to include it here. Number one. So going through the 12 lists, the list of 12 items, multi-factor was number one. The concept of a username and password just isn't going to be sufficient anymore. And like Joe said, with the exception of maybe one insurance provider, this is a deal killer on whether you can get covered or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, dude, thank you. And sorry, it just kicked in where Joel made a comment that it's good to have an acceptable use policy. And yes, yeah, it's more than good. You really have to do it. So when you are training staff, you've provided an explanation of what the boundaries are and to be able to hold everybody true to it. And another thing that happens when you have an acceptable use policy or any policies, you really have to look at those from an organizational wide perspective, get the perspective of different departments, not so much just IT. IT essentially implements it, but we want to have executive leadership understand that it's been looked at from all departments, give it their blessing, and then IT can go ahead and implement the controls like that. And yeah, Jill, it needs to be enforced, not just enabled. You're absolutely right. Second thing is endpoint detection and response. Antivirus is good. Endpoint detection and response will take it to the next level where the software not only may detect something, but can act on it to imagine if one device gets compromised, a good EDR solution can isolate that device to prevent it from spreading throughout the network. Third item is secure backups. With ransomware attacks, they have evolved from getting into a network and encrypting it and saying, you need to pay us if you want any of this back. It's evolved to where now they will take a copy of the data, hold it with the threat of releasing it on the dark web or wherever. And if that happens, yeah, there is a vulnerability to that. But if we do have what's called an immutable backup, which means it is not part of the network, the data is safe, we have the ability to do a restore from that immutable backup, which would have been outside of the scope of what a hacker could have done when we go to do a restore after we've made sure that that everything's been cleaned up and we have a safe environment to work within.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Dave, that insurance companies are really looking for how you're backing up your systems. And of course, immutable backup is kind of the gold standard. So that's kind of thing that is going to get you the better pricing and show the insurance company that you guys are serious about cybersecurity.
How many clients do you talk to before you talk to them are aware of what an immutable backup is?
It's the more sophisticated clients are doing it, but most small businesses don't have immutable backups.
Sure. No, it happens over here as well, for sure. So one of the takeaways is, if that is new to anybody attending, add that word to your vocabulary. It'll help you when you're going through the application process of this. And it's kind of one of those, I don't want to call it a buzzword because it's here now and it's probably here to stay, but very important in that regard. Number 4 on our list is network access controls. And this is really, this exploded when the pandemic hit, because if we think about how we were doing things before the pandemic, people would go into the office, the devices are all behind firewalls and switches that are at the office. And pretty much overnight, everybody had to start working remotely. So now they're outside of that firewall. So network access controls are really how we manage what an individual has access to, and that they don't have access to more than they need. We want to let them do their job. We want to give them what they need, but we don't want to give them access to everything. 5 is filtering content. Think of, I think the classic way of thinking of this is like email filtering. And for as much as we do email filtering, spam still gets through. It's a cat and mouse thing. But imagine, I forget the number, but it's, I believe, over 50% of email traffic is spam and bots. So we're really trying to, so be aware of that. We want to filter things as best as possible, but also think about how we can filter incoming, what's coming into the network, as well as what's going out of the network. You can, there's solutions like DLP, data loss protection, that if you have some seriously confidential information, it can be marked that way, and it can be configured within a network that information is not allowed to leave the network. We are, when we talk about filtering, it's to certainly get us past that first level of what is coming in. But if we can identify traffic that's going in and out, we're much more aware of what's happening, and we've got a much better opportunity to protect against something malicious that may happen. Vulnerability management is patch management. I think everything out there is going to have it, software wise and stuff. There's going to be patches. New vulnerabilities are always being detected. There and the little circle icon-y thing there is actually a process for managing patches, and we want to be aware that there's going to be patches for critical vulnerabilities, things along those lines. There's a slide coming up on how cyber insurance companies now, if you use software that's no longer manufactured by the company, that is not covered. Because once software is no longer being covered, they're no longer creating batches for it. So if you have something that's out of life, unprotected, vulnerabilities will be detected, and if it's public facing, it's a consistent vulnerability and risk to an organization. But we will work where I work at FR Secure. Vulnerability patch management is probably one of the bigger challenges that IT departments have to face, just because there are so many patches and you have to schedule them and you have to do it in a way that's not disruptive to the organization. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Incident response planning. This kind of goes back to the slide that we had in the beginning of, if you fail to plan, you have planned to fail. You really want to know, and this comes up, one of the earlier stages in doing incident response planning is to look at, if I take you back here, oops. If we look at the risks in these areas, that will help give us an understanding or an outline of what sort of incidents we think that can happen to the organization, and how we can protect against those. Number 8 is cybersecurity awareness training. Humans are the weakest link, not because they don't care, but because they're the ones that can touch a keyboard, and they're the ones that can receive an email that may have a bad click on it. So, excuse me, insurance companies know it. It is the number one point of attack for clients, for organizations. And so that makes it on our list.
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing for social engineering and reverse social engineering, cybercrime in general, you're getting sublimits of like a maximum of 250,000, is because those are the times where the human element is most prevalent and it's hardest to control.
Yep. Secure remote access. If somebody is on the outside trying to get inside the network, how insurance companies are going to want to know what is the process that they go through to help secure that, because hackers are accessing remotely. So we want to be able to really have a strategy on how people working remote are able to access resources securely and keep the bad guys out. The bad guys and the bad gals. Monitoring event logs. This is, so like if you know all the devices that you have, your hardware, your software, all of those sorts of things. If we have a SIEM or a SIEM is going to collect all the logs for all of those. A SOC is going to review those logs. So, and there are now where there's actually companies that you can hire to provide this service. And what you can do, and it works great for smaller organizations, where this will give you insight into what's happening. And then if there's an anomaly on something, they can turn around and they'll send you a notification that you can then act on. But it also takes away the need to think that you have to do all of this on your own, and that you don't have that level of support or resource available. Replacing end-of-life systems. Like we were talking about earlier, if you're running a version of Windows that's no longer protected, Microsoft's not making patches for it. And if that device is going on the internet, you're vulnerable to the vulnerabilities within that operating system. And the way we wanted to share this slide with everybody is this can be it can be hardware, it can be the software that goes on computers, it can be the operating system, it can be an older version of QuickBooks or other types of programs along those lines. It can be network equipment, it can be your firewalls, your switches, anything along those lines. They're definitely a potential place of attack. And IoT devices, like we talked about earlier, where those are still the Wild West. We always recommend, if you're going to put them on your network in some capacity, segregate them off from the rest of the network. So if anything does happen to those, the rest of your operations are segregated, and you have that additional layer of protection on there. The last one in the list is managing the supply chain risk, and this can impact you in all sorts of ways. Can you get the parts that you need to build the product that you develop and sell? It's kind of listed in here. You know, we want to, like, for example, if we use pension funds as an example, and this is something we've run into at work, so pension funds manage money, they manage a lot of private information. Well, just to share, the Department of Labor came down and has now told pension funds, not only do we need to know what you're doing to protect all that information, but we need all of you we need you to vet any third-party vendor that you work with that has access to that information. So now pension funds need to assess their the banks, the attorneys, accountants, any of those that have access to some of that information. So the level of ownership in this continues to grow, and that's just one example that falls under what supply chain risk could be. Also, if you think about how MSPs, managed service providers that provide support for IT, they're popular targets now, because if a bad person can get into an MSP, then they have immediate access to all of that MSP's clients. So that's why we share that. And then this was the This was knowing your incident response procedures. This is one that we wanted to add in here to share with everybody. And the point here on this one isn't your conventional incident response sort of like we were talking on the other slides. This is work with your cyber insurance provider. At the time that you're negotiating your contract, understand with them if something happens to you, what's going to happen. A lot of insurance companies already have their book of incident responders that they're going to call. You may have another provider, you may have an MSP, but we need to know collectively who's going to do what when something happens. And if you have somebody you prefer, you really need to bring that up before you sign the policy. Once you sign the policy, your ability to negotiate that stuff is kind of gone for the most part. But if you can bring it up then, like for example, where I work, we provide those services. So we just try and make clients be aware of what they're setting up when they go to renew their renew their policy. Run that through the gauntlet as much as anything else that you are going through.
Yeah, some companies won't let you pick at all, and some companies will. So that could be a big factor if you want to use the people that know your system already. You need to use an insurance carrier that's open to using them for incident response when the time comes.
Yeah, and it's just something that you want to know in advance. It's part of putting that plan together. So in the last few minutes, we're going to cover the slides that we have to help provide some resources. And these ones here are organizations that are out there that have resources available. I'm going to drop the link to what we make available through work in the chat, but there we go. If you go to that page, we make policy templates available. Like Joe was mentioning about an acceptable use policy. We have a template for that. We've got tabletop examples. There's a bunch of resources there. They are wide open, available for free. You can download. You don't even need to give an email address. As part of our mission to fix a broken industry, we want to have those there. SANS is another third-party organization that has some great resources available. And NIST and CISA are resources that are branches of the federal government. You'll find that and actually they have their cybersecurity framework, privacy framework, a lot of things like that. All of that is available at no cost to you. And like I said, you don't need to, slide deck will be made available, and each of these has links to it. If you are local to San Diego, like Joe and I, these are some resources within the community that you can reach out to for, excuse me, pardon me, for additional information, additional resources, and places that you can ask questions. And actually some other, they can connect you with some other small organizations or organizations similar to yours that may be helpful as well. Last slide before thank you is if something were to happen. Here are some resources available to you. Where I work, we offer a no obligation complimentary 30-minute consultation if something happens. The link there will allow you to, you just send an email or fill out the form, someone will contact you. And they'll walk you through, let you know what your options are. Again, no pressure. We just, if you're going through that, we know how painful it is, and we want to be there for you as best we can. This will also say, check with your cyber insurance company for what would happen. There's a local resource called the Identity Theft Resource Center that will help walk through. They're a nonprofit, so they will help. And then the last two here are, again, governmental organizations were something to happen. This is the last slide. And yeah, and Joe and I just really want to say thank you. If you have any questions or you want to chat at all in any more detail outside of this, here's our contact information. I am seeing that under me, if you want to contact the ISACA chapter, don't use that D at the beginning. It's ISACA San Diego @gmail.com. I just had an extra consonant and it got used there. But I know that we're at the top of the hour. We want to be respectful for everybody's time. But if anybody does have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you for all the kind words that we're receiving. We'll hang on for another moment if anybody does have a question. Otherwise, we'll let everybody go. Do you have anything last? Any closing thoughts, Mr.?
No, I just want to thank you, Dave, for all the information and putting most of this presentation together. It's super informative, very helpful information, and for being a resource to me and the community.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a passion to help, and hopefully it carries through and what we're sharing with everybody. But even as we wrap this up again, if anybody does have any questions or want to reach out just to Joe or I, the door's wide open. And we do appreciate everybody having taken their time and spending it with us. So on that note, we'll let everybody go and take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.